Okay, welcome everybody to the last OD talk for the year, and we're doing this one with the SAODN, the South African OD Network, which is quite exciting. I'm wearing both hats today, the Willsview Academy hat and the SAODN hat. I'm a board member of the SAODN, and so is Samuel Kemp, who's on this call somewhere. There's Samuel. On behalf of the SAODN, we want to welcome you and apologize for the SAODN being so awfully quiet this year. I think that a few things fell by the wayside, and the networking events obviously didn't happen. And those of us that help the SAODN achieve its purpose are all people who are full-time employed. We do it on a volunteer basis, and I think it might have taken a back foot. But there's plans in the making for next year to get up and running. So I'm glad that we can share this one with the SAODN to just get a few people back into the swing of believing in OD and evangelizing OD and spreading the good word. So welcome everybody, and I can't believe we've made it this far. We were just talking about the dark days of lockdown. Yay, Roy. And Allon was saying, no, it's still dark, or it's dark again. It opens and it closes. And in South Africa, we don't know what's coming next. But if you listen to the radio, there's areas where they've got numbers higher than what they had at the peak. So we'll see what's waiting for us. But yeah, thank you. And I see quite a few regulars on the call. There's people that I never met before lockdown started that became good friends. Tlingiwe, I'm going to single you out on that one specifically.
Hi.
Hello, nice to have you here. And people that we knew a little bit that we now know quite well, like Una and a few others, and Michael, who's not even part of the Willsview community officially anymore, is here. So it's so nice to see everybody. Bernardi, the first time I met you was at an actual OD Cafe in Woodmead. I'm so glad you managed to figure out your technical issues and that you could join us. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi everybody.
Nice to see you again. Okay, so for those of you that joined the OD Talks throughout this year, you would have met Allon on one of those. It was quite early on in the start of the OD Talks. The topic was quite similar, but we also focused on mergers and acquisitions in that talk. So we're taking a bit of a different direction now. And also, I think it's about 6 months later, 5 months later, where we've seen stuff happening and we've seen things change. And we were having a conversation this morning, Christian, Allon, and me, and he asked me, do OD people in is there work for OD at the moment in South Africa? What's happening? And I said, we went from this absolute complete, like it was dead, you know, we could hear the crickets chirp, and there was just nothing happening. And we kept on trying, we kept on having OD talks and OD check-ins in the mornings and reaching out to clients, and we got to learn from what's going on, and there seems to be a bit of an uptake for work in our profession, and I'm talking from an OD consultancy point of view, but also the clients that the people that we know that are OD practitioners in the businesses seem to be running off their feet. They're very busy. It's been a rough year. There's been retrenchments and restructurings, and training budgets fell out the window and came back in, and so on and so forth. So we've been experiencing all of that. And then we talked a little bit about that we had to go through a mind shift change to accept that we will be able to do leadership development, management development, team development, etc. online. Because we used to say to people, no, 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 you have to be in the same room to do that. So we had to change our minds to do it. But then we also had to change our clients' minds, and they had to accept that this is possible. And a few people have accepted that, and we have done it, and it wasn't a disaster. I still think face-to-face is nicer, it's richer, but it was still really valuable. So we were talking about that, and Allon's written an article that basically says online will disappear soon. And when we were talking about skills for OD practitioners, one of the skills we definitely learned this year is to facilitate online. And to make things happen online and to keep it engaging and to handle Zoom above all other things and breakout rooms and multitask kind of while you're talking, and sometimes talking to a pitch black screen and not seeing any body language and nobody's smiling and nodding at you. So I was thinking to ask Allon to kick us off with his thoughts on online will disappear. Now that we're ready for online and we feel confident to do things online, Allon, you're saying it's going to fall off the radar soon.
Yeah, well, good afternoon. I think that it's a passing fad. I think that OD is very prone to management trends because basically the profession often spins off into trends and fads and management fad of the month or whatever fashion du jour or whatever you'd like. Clearly, the working online and remote working, or I have a correspondence with a Spanish OD. They call it teletrabajo. Okay, all of this working remote and sitting in front of a screen. We don't really have a choice now, and people do and will spend a day and a half at home. But I think I'm almost sure that this thing will, when we all get the injection, whether it's Russian or whatever, if it's Russian, who knows if it will be around, but one of the other injections, I think that as we return to normal in about 8 months from now, I think that there are 4 things which are going to impact why we're not going to be working from home and remote. And I think that certainly facilitation won't be done. Number 1 is a home is a home and a workplace is a workplace. And when you put both of them in the same geographical place, you've got a lot of stress, like bringing your kid to work, or your dog to work or whatever. They make noise. They do their business, and you have to change their diaper. They make noise. When you bring your work home, you've got a lot of stress. This morning when I spoke to Liesl and Christo, I had 2 packages delivered. But home cannot take the stress. When I say home, it's marriage, it's a partner, it's the physical wear, it's the psychological wear and tear of working from home has become almost unbearable for many people. We've got, not only here, but there's anxiety, there's agoraphobia, there's lack of innovation. It's very difficult to innovate when you're working from home. So first reason would be working from home is stressful. The second thing is there's no innovation. I think that the third thing is that management feels that they don't control things when you're at home. And they I don't know whether they control better, but they certainly think they control better when you're at work. That would be, and then fourth, there's a lot of money which is being invested in bringing people to work, whether it's cars, whether it's fashion, whether it's getting new gadgets, doesn't matter what. There's a lot of financial and innovation which is going to coax people back to work. Maybe because they'll go to a restaurant on the way to work and back, who knows? But I do not think that working from home will continue. I think it's psychologically untenable. I think managerially it's untenable, and we can't fool ourselves that how we are living now can create organizations which are innovative. It's very hard to innovate. We can communicate this way. We can't innovate this way. A lot of the informality doesn't exist. The technology, at least I spend at least 10 minutes of every hour trying to sign in or to sign out, or I can't hear you, or I can't see you. So I think that we've fallen into a trap of thinking that the next great skill is the ability to work virtually, and that's a key. It's a key success factor for facilitators of the future. But I remember when TQM, Total Quality Management, if you didn't know that, you were jack shit. You were work at, and everyone studied TQM or In Search of Excellence. We had those 12 principles. There's always something which is fashionable and faddish, and that eats away at what OD really is. So I do not think that it's a key skill. I don't even think it has anything to do with the future of organizations or OD. I think that most people are going to work at home a day and a half a week, and that's it. So those are my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, and I guess there's here and there's some of our clients that's saying to us, but they are actually saving money because they now don't have to fly people up and down to come and attend training, and put them up in hotels and buy them expensive lunches. So I guess there's that side that might cause some online training to still happen because we've now tried it and it's okay. But
the cost cutters are people who are very powerful now, okay? Because they're not generating revenue. The people who do the choppy,
There also the sense, Liesel, that we could move some stuff online, like training, but much of the organization development work, you really feel the lack. If you have, if for instance you work with a team, and there's so much that happens in the in-between spaces. I think so much in organization development happens in the in-between spaces where you are in the same space, but you meet over the water.
Can't hear you.
Or you see someone frown, or you see someone fold his arms, or someone walks out in disgust, or and all of those sorts of things that that I think, Allon, to your point, it's from an organization development perspective to really do the OD work. It's untenable. We actually really need people to look each other in the face, but not only just in the eyes. They need to see everything. They need to.
Well, not everything.
Well, yeah, but a lot of these in between things that are happening in when people really figure out difficult stuff.
Yeah, I want to say about training. I know that watching training YouTubes or stuff like that, people do it. Now, the question is it effective? I know that I've studied things online, and I know of organizations who have taught things online. You can chalk it up to age, or you can chalk it up to my limited experience, but I don't think that anything can compare to face-to-face training. And I want to give an example of Boeing safety instructions with that plane which was grounded. I don't know the name of the plane. They did all that training, okay, by YouTube. Now, it seems, okay, it's reasonable. Instead of flying people all over the world, send them you send a lot of money. Just one thing, people don't learn by YouTube the way that they learn when they're sitting in their room and they're being watched, and there's a degree of enforcement, and there's a degree of discipline. So look, I'll give you just one simple example for myself. My hobby is history, and I've been studying Middle East history now for 8 years, just taking courses. And this year I'm watching it on the screen. I'm playing with my phone, and I'm not focused. I don't know what's going on. I'm not riveted. And so I think that face-to-face and traditional training will help deal with attention deficit, which all of this technology is causing to be a real pandemic. That people, you can't look at a screen and say you're concentrating like you do when you're face-to-face. So I think all types of, I'm even more radical, it's OD and training, especially when you need to be effective, like safety training or certain types of team building or team effectiveness. I think what we seeing now is a passing fad.
Allon, if I may, can I ask a question, Liesl?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Marie.
I don't know. I'm just wondering, when I hear you say online is dead, it sounds like, we'll almost swing again to the far right, where people were working from home and now suddenly it's going to the scourge of being, in a physical work environment again. And I almost imagine that maybe the successful organizations would vacillate between these two worlds, where you could work from home and still be able to go into the organization. Because the cost conversation is real, where you're hearing organizations say, yes, it is not ideal, but the reality is our operational cost has gone down extremely. We're not paying the rent. We don't have to pay for physical bodies on seat. And I think you wouldn't really be able to get away from the cost benefit. So maybe in my optimistic mind, I'm thinking the organizations that did well would really live perfectly or marry these two worlds, as opposed to either or. We could perhaps have both and.
All right, Marie, I want to comment on what you're saying. I think you and Liesl mentioned the cost, and what I'm saying now is that revenues are extraordinarily low, and therefore cost cutters are making the call. So I think that as long as organizations struggle, anything which saves money, okay, will prevail. I think that's my first comment. The second comment is, how sustainable is an organization where people don't meet? We don't have a lot of experience with that. Okay, how long can people function as an organization when they've never met? Now, there's certain things we don't know now, okay, but we'll know in 2 or 3 years from now. For example, if I have known you, if we have met face-to-face before, okay, we are basically sustaining something, okay? It's like sustaining a relationship when someone goes abroad to study for a year. Even that can be a problem, but we're sustaining something, okay? But let's start onboarding people now. Let's have people leave now. Let's start to recruit people who have never met before. Let's add to that business crises where you need to come together like that and get over the small talk and get right down to business. Let's talk about issues where we need create a lot of creativity and flexibility. I think what you're going to have is a question of organizational sustainability, which will be weakened by the social fabric. And for example, only next year, okay, will America have had more years without slavery than with slavery. That's 1 year from now, okay? 1 year from now. We don't know yet what an organization will look like, which is virtual. We don't know what it looks like, but we can look at certain organizations which we know are virtual. We can look at, for example, at religions. Okay, they're very virtual. It's true that there are communities, but there are global organizations of religions, and we can see there huge disparities, huge differences, difficulty making decisions. I would say almost disintegration. I personally do not think that, I think that as costs become more marginalized when organizations come back to earn more money, I think the cost cutters and the bean counters will be put in their place. I think that the desire of managers to control will come back. I want to say another thing about real estate. Okay, let's think. You have a building, and the building exudes status. You have managers with huge rooms that exude status. You've got visual perks. An organization has a caste structure. Okay, it has a caste structure, and that caste structure is enhanced by physical attributes. And I do not see the managerial crust, upper class, allowing that physical manifestation of their power as disappearing. Working virtual is a great equalizer, and I don't think that people will let go of their power. And if we have to pay a lot of money for real estate, so be it. It's also a great stratifier. It's a wonderful stratifier, a building. It reinforces who the chickens are, who the roosters are, who the hens are, who the pigs are. It is the physical manifestation of power. And so I think that the back to we're going to stay this way and all work virtual is a social equalizer which will not take off.
Allon?
Yeah.
I recently wrote an article on what I call the illusion of connectedness. And in my research, I came across an Edward Hallowell, Harvard psychiatrist, who coined this term human moment when talking about connectedness. And he said that, and I'm going to just quote from him, an authentic psychological encounter that can happen only when two people share the same physical space. And in the article, I went on to ask the question, well, can we have a virtual human moment? And I guess that's the question we're asking here.
And I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
I think now there are some, because it's the constraint. We say in Hebrew, "Zeh ma sheyesh." That's what there is. But it's basically we don't have any choice now. But I don't think that if it's real, and it may be real now, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, I happen to agree with your sustainability comment, but more based on the the discipline issue that you raised. If people actually had discipline, this is going to be quite negative. We wouldn't have anti-litter laws, we wouldn't have traffic lights, and we wouldn't have speed restrictions. But we simply need them because people, if left to their own devices, tend to, wander off reservation, as it were. And of course, the temptation at home is to do just that. And so I just think it's perhaps it'll be a way that companies that do have discipline will rise and will be sustainable. And it might be a competitive edge down the line, perhaps, if you can sustain that.
Yeah, I also think, to go back to what Marie said, or what Marie asked, I think that there's an issue here which is contingent. I think that there are certain people and professions, not people, but professions that can work from home. I don't see a reason why a bookkeeper can't work from home. I don't see how a bookkeeper, I don't think there's any added value to a bookkeeper working. By the way, I'm contradicting myself. One of my clients didn't pay me yesterday, and I was at the client, and I walked into her and I said, Faina, I haven't gotten paid. So she called over 2 cubicles. She says, Shevat. And the other woman pulled up the invoice and she gave it to me, to her, and I was paid. So yeah, it would have happened, but it's slower. So I think that there are people who can work from home. I think they're few and far between. Over a protracted period of time. And this is not the time to judge it, because at least here you go out and you go to work, you're going to get sick, right? So there's no other choice but to look at it this way.
If I can come in here, I find the discussion very interesting and
I can only see your forehead. So can you go back a bit? So I can look at, there we go.
Can you see me now?
Yeah, your forehead's nice, but it's better to see your whole face.
I'll sit up straight. Yeah, so I find this discussion very interesting, and in our organization, there's obviously this discussion going on, but I must say I work mainly in change management, and I say to the guys, you're going to have a huge change management effort to get me back, driving an hour in the morning, driving an hour in the afternoon, getting me sitting in my office and not really having much difference. I think we've and don't want to go into this whole the whole story, but over the past 18 months, our organization SASL for the South Africans has gone through a very, very difficult time, and I was part of a team that had to sell some assets to the, and at this point in time they stand at $3 billion US dollars that we've actually sold, and we've done that basically all online. Engaging with companies all across the world, it just made it much easier. It would have required people in person to travel to the US and to France, and for those buyers that buy South African assets to travel to South Africa. And because of COVID, it was not possible, and it actually worked. But I think what I agree with you a lot is that whole discipline thing. I think it was a team with high focus, high deliverables, and got the team focused on where we were going, and the collaboration was great. I must say, 2 of the people that I worked very closely on this project joined on the 1st of April. How's that for April Fool's Day? They went into the office, got their laptops, went back home, and they've worked. And I said to the one guy, and we don't use video a lot. I said to him, if I bump into you at the office, I won't even really know what you look like or recognize you. But we've actually become very good friends. So I think there are definitely moments where you can actually online do that. But I think maybe the situation is quite exceptional, and it's not the norm.
We're talking about an extraordinary amount of exogenic focus, which is forcing us to do it that way. What I'm saying is that exogenic focus will compete with the drive of managers to control and for power to be manifested in ranks and in physical manifestations. And there are also prices which we're paying. I'll give a metaphor, a medical metaphor. Here in Israel, we started something like 2 cases a day, and then within 3 months it was 10,000 cases a day, and we're 9 million people. So then we drove it down. But for the 2 months that it was 10,000 people a day, you couldn't see a doctor. It was all telemedicine. And you had a rash, you had to take a picture of the rash and send it out. You couldn't see, you were taking shots of everything was, and there were huge medical problems which were ignored. And so it worked. It was like barefoot doctor, you know, you did the bare minimum. But I think that we're being fooled that what we can do now is sustainable over time.
Allon, the interesting point for me here is your point about OD following fads.
Oh, yeah.
Here.
There's a book I want to recommend called The Witch Doctors. I think it's called The Witch Doctors, but I'll send you it's two English guys. Or OD is in love with fads, especially since it's driven by commercial standards more than by professional standards. We need to please and titulate our clients, which, by the way, I don't do. Maybe that explains why I have clients. But what you need to do is also innovate all the time and change and perfume the pig and whatever, and hiding the grossness with fair ornament, something from Shakespeare. So we have to, that's from, let the outward shows beneath themselves, the world is still deceived by ornament. That's one of the Shakespearean plays. And I think that in terms of what OD is infected with is a desire to innovate so as to please our clients with solutions. OD does not provide solutions. OD solves, I would say, serves as a midwife to some problems and gives birth to new problems. As Marie said before, you decentralize, then you create problems of apathy, and so then you decentralize and you lose control. You go back and forth. That's what OD does. It enables an organization to solve A and creates B. Okay, and that's a very hard message to live. So let's take that dirty little pig and perfume him. We'll dip him in water and we'll put perfume on his lips and we'll dress him up as something else. But it's a very, very painful process. And so we like fads, it's window dressing. We can't do what a dentist does, like open your mouth, okay? And I'm going to now pull a couple of teeth and then you'll build your, build the bone, and then put in a few screws and then wait 2 months and then put in something else. And by the way, give me $100,000. We can't do that. We can't do it. So we're forced to do something else, and that is fads. And some people have made that tragedy into an ideology. And that's why I think we're falling so much in love with this virtual stuff.
We're saying sometimes OD work does feel like pulling teeth.
Yeah, don't talk about dentists to me. We have an expression here that says, in the house of the condemned, don't bring a rope. So I don't want to talk about dentists.
Yeah, and Allon, I think this morning also when we were talking, the conversation turned to what type of OD work was actually out there at the moment. And I said what I did see among some of our network was that a lot of them saying that they've seen an uptake in individual coaching. So I'm gonna take this conversation there. That individual coaching is easy to do one-on-one on Zoom or whatever the platform is, because a lot of coaches has done it before. and then you started challenging, but is coaching OD?
Yeah, there's been a battle between OD and coaching. OD is lost, by the way. You know, let's be very clear. In that battle, that economic battle, OD has certainly come up with the short end of the stick. But I want to talk a little bit about coaching. First of all, it's very prominent even before we all went into shutdown because it's marketable. It's much easier to explain than OD coaching. You know, well, a tennis coach, a golf coach, a management coach. I understand that. Number one. Number two, there are no standards. Anyone can dress up as a coach. Three, it's very easy. There's a trend of downloading tasks to other people to do. There's a book I just read by Ehrlichman in which we take, it's about, you know, in the US, and I know in South Africa, you have a cook who, it used to be, I don't know what it is now, a cook who does this, a maid who does this, a gardener does this. You download things to other people. And so we can download our coaching, our food to a food coach, or our weight to a weight coach, and some of our management problems to a management coach, and we can focus on the other parts, which of course may be true, it may be not. I think it's the Donald Trumpism of OD. I think it's populist crap, to be honest. OD coaching has a place. It certainly has a place but I'll talk about its place in a minute. But OD is a system change, okay? And working with one individual when there's a system problem, that's called repression. That's not change. So I think that coaching of an individual, okay, what it does is it represses system problems, because it says, okay, well, she has a problem. And I'm going to give, because this is a South African group, I'm going to give an example of an interesting metaphor. One of the things, you know, that societies with a history of racial unrest, as they migrate into the more into a different era, much better era, there's a lot of pointing out, well, he's a racist, she's a racist, he's a racist, he was a racist, she was a racist, this is racist. And that basically is trying to simplify the fact that there's a foundation, not a person, that bred this whole system. It's built into the infrastructure of the society. It's a crack in the foundation. And pointing out that this person or that person does something is a simplification of how serious, okay, the flaw is. Okay, now when we coach someone, we are saying, well, we don't have a system problem. We will solve this individual's problem, okay, and the system can go on functioning. That's repression. Okay, OD deals in repression to some ways, but this is like blatant repression, because we're personifying where the problem is. And I'll give you an example. He doesn't deal with stress well. Coach him. Well, what does this guy do? Let's talk about what this guy do. Or she has an anger problem, you know? She works in customer service, but she has an anger problem. Or this person can't achieve work-life balance properly. Let's look at these problems, and we can basically say, we are going to help you, Mr. Horse, get used to that saddle on your back. We're going to coach you. And that is repression. Now, when we have, so that's one thing. Number two, let's look at this. We're all at home, so it's much easier to coach one person than it is to coach a group. So it's much easier to market If it's easier to market, people are going to do it more. Okay, that's number two. Number three, as Michael pointed out, is it real? Is this virtual moment real? I don't think it's real compared to what something else is. So maybe coaching can go easier. I don't know. And then there's one more point about coaching, is that it is, in my mind, just another fad. So I am not worried that in the long run, okay, coaching will replace OD. I think it's been a very difficult period for OD in the past 20 years or 15, 20 years. But it doesn't mean that OD is down and out. What it means is, I want to go into history, for example. Many religions which spread very quickly, they spread very quickly, but they don't have a lot of control of themselves. Others which spread far less quickly have more control and are more sustainable. You just have to look at the history of religion to see that some smaller religions have much more control of influence over what their believers think and do than something which is widely spread. I think that coaching is boundaryless, and I think it will, if it hasn't already, almost become a passing fad. I think it'll another couple of years, and more serious will replace it. Now, that isn't to say that there isn't a lot of really important work which is done in coaching, but as part of an OD project.
Yeah, I see Deborah made a comment here. Deborah, do you want to speak to that?
Well, Deborah, let me read what it says.
Yeah, hi. Hello, everyone. I think maybe what you said at the end about as part of an OD project, because I do think, personally, I think coaching does play a role. I think it's leaders who have to shift systems and have to drive culture. And when one coaches, and I think a lot of the training of qualified coaches at the moment, so I'm not talking about life coaches or people who do a particular philosophy, but the kind of coaching that is offered by business schools is coaching. It's often referred to as business coaching or organizational coaching, is coached. A key element is within the system and within the culture, and how do we influence leaders as OD practitioners to be able to influence and drive change and improvements and whatever it is in the system. And so I agree that coaching as something that anyone can have from an OD practitioner is not necessarily important. People who are future talent or have a strategic role in the business, I do think benefit greatly from coaching. And then lastly, I think systemic team coaching is something that OD should be driving far more, aligning teams
Totally agree with you.
to the strategy and purpose and aligning them to each other.
Totally agree, Deborah, with your last comment about team coaching. In my mind, team coaching falls in the category of organizational development. I think that taking an individual and growing their capacity certainly falls within the realm of organizational development. It's a change within a person, but I want to just so that I'm clear, let's talk about a purchasing department and a maintenance department where there's a lot of friction. And there's a lot of friction because the maintenance people don't want to get into a whole lot of description, about a certain subject, and they want the purchasing people to do that work. Okay, that can't be handled by coaching each person differently. That has to be, you have to sit down with the people and talk about it together. Or, for example, the marketing people say, we need this released in 6 months. And the developers say, well, we need that in a year and a half. We can't coach each side. We have to, what I'm saying is marriage counseling is 2 people, not 1 person. So anything where, any point where the change is individual, coaching is very legitimate. I would call it consulting, but it's coaching. But whenever we're teaching people to adapt to an organizational problem and not solve it, or to internalize what other people should be doing as their own personal problem, I think that's a misuse of coaching. So I think we agree on about 70% of the issues.
Yeah, I still feel that senior executive leaders do need coaching if they're going to take the organization to where it needs to go to. Because coaching is a thinking partner, and I think OD is better placed if they're trained as professional coaches as well to do that thinking, because OD understands the whole system. So yeah, we can agree to disagree on this one.
I think that senior management coaching will change the individual. I don't think it drives system change. I don't think it's powerful enough to drive system change. Because let's take a team of 8, okay, and we have 2 new VPs, and we're coaching them on how to change the culture. Ain't gonna work. That's a system intervention. So I think that when we're talking about horsepower, okay, horsepower, I think that coaching can provide an individual with horsepower. That transfer of horsepower to the organization, in my mind, is something that we have to talk about.
It's maybe something that's quite generic in our culture, is to, or quite general, is to shift systemic responsibility to the individual. And then to think that if we fix the individual, or if we just put the responsibility on the individual, we have done what we needed to do. And in that way, if we do coach, we have to be incredibly careful not to become complicit in systemic self-deception.
I agree. I think that it's marketable. It changes. It can drive change, but I think it is, from an OD perspective, repressive of change, not necessarily by design, but when we have, we'll say 10,000 or 100,000 euro, and we're spending 80,000 on coaching and 20,000 on system intervention, it's counterproductive.
We've got a question here from Dr. Maureen as well. She's asking, Dr. Maureen, do you want to ask the question, or do you want me to read it?
Is she there?
No, I can see her. She's on mute. Okay, I'll read it for now. But if you can connect, then
Dr. Maureen Mudenda.
So she's asking, how do you think the role or roles of the OD practitioner will evolve post the pandemic beyond being faddish?
That's a great question. And why do I say it's a great question? Because I have an answer for it. Okay. I think that the market is and will be cruel for a long time. And we have a lot of humanistic principles driving us. And I think it will be difficult to reconcile some of our more humanistic principles to the cruelness of organizational reality, because we're not going to get an infection, what do you call it, an injection, and things are going to be, you know, hunky dory within a month. There's going to be a need to crank up organizations, and a lot of organizations are going to try to leverage on the cost cutting, which they've managed to do now, to get to a point where that Liesl and Marie were talking about. Okay, there is a lot of costs, a lot of choppy, which has taken place, and management is going to try to preserve some of that. And, you know, we have a bag full of humanistic values, and the question is, how applicable are those values in a reality of deep organizational change? So there's one, I think, of casting aside some of our more humanistic values and a need to be a little more pragmatic. That would be number one, because we are not only infected by fads, but we're infected by a whole bunch of ideas which were born by European old men after a world war to solve those problems then. They're not our problems today. It's a different kettle of fish. That's number one. I think the second thing is that if we take plan, execute, follow up, okay, as the old model, no one knows where we're going now. So we need to be much more flexible in the way that we work with management to make changes, because the reality is extraordinarily complex and our models don't work. That's why I'm against fads. They just don't work, okay? And because we have a whole bag of tools that don't work, that's why we go to fads. Now, the managers don't know how to deal with the reality. I've got news, neither do we. But that's the mindset we have to push. What do you do when you don't know? Okay, and dealing and coping with that huge amount of ambiguity should drive us to support managers in their quest for what needs to be done, and not to give them a false hope, which we need, because we in OD, we need to have fads, we need to have tricks, we need to have things which we pull out of our, how do you call this in English, the sleeve. Yeah, but we don't have them. So I think that we have to really focus on the fact that they don't know, and by the way, neither do we. What we can offer them is partnership. Now, that's not marketable if we compare it to coaching. It's not marketable, but that's what the need is. That's what the need is. And I think, you know, how do we market the fact that you have a problem, okay, and I don't know exactly or even partially how to give you the medicine that you need? How do we market that, as opposed to someone says, well, I'm a change manager, I have 50 slides of how you can to manage change, and I think that we have an added value there. But for that, we need to put aside our aspirations of being coaches or being change managers, because we have real value. And the real value is we see tremendous leverage in prolonged ambiguity. OD, if you go back to how we help people deal with ambiguity, I think that's a marvelous advantage to bring to the table.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit more about the relationship between OD and change management?
Yeah, I think that change managers have the following assumptions. Number one, change can be managed. Okay, OD does not think that change can be managed. Okay, number two, change management thinks of planning, execution, and follow-up, and OD deals with the hidden dynamic. It doesn't deal with the iceberg which is above the water. It deals with the iceberg below the iceberg below the level of the water. Number 3 is that change management, what's the word in English? Not alludes. I think it gives an illusion with I. It gives an illusion of clarity. Okay, OD gives you the burden, but the advantage of ambiguity. I think that change managers think they make kids. They think that they're doing it. And I think that OD people are midwives. We're not in the bedroom. By the way, the kid that's born isn't ours. So the change manager thinks he owns change, but he doesn't. His boss manages change. Okay, another difference is a change manager gets delegated by a senior manager. You do this change. This is the change, you do it. And OD says, no, man, you do it. I'm not doing it. I think there's a huge difference. I don't think that change management should belong to OD in any way, shape, or form. I think it's another profession, and I think it should be in industrial engineering or systems or whatever you want. It's not the same profession. It's a different profession. Coming with 82 slides and saying step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, that's not what we do. Unfortunately, we do it, but it's not OD. It's a growth within OD. It's an unhealthy growth that has to be cut out. Well, come on. We are assuming that we show a set of 84 slides and you do this and you do that. That's not OD, for heaven's sakes. It's like going to a witch doctor and he says, woo, you know, you're not going to have a migraine anymore. It may work, but it's not medicine.
Yet, according to the South African Board for People Practices in South Africa, it is classified as sitting under OD. I'm really hoping that somebody on this call wants to challenge you, Allon, or even agree, but to take part in this conversation. Come on, everybody. There's a few of you that has been or are in change management.
Oh my God. Come on, speak up. I don't disappear.
Okay, I probably don't have an opinion here, but it seems to me that the concept change management includes the notion that there must be some kind of change. So it presupposes something that has been examined and evaluated and decided. Whereas OD is looking at whether in fact there should be change or whether there should be anything for that matter. So the change manager for me is a pawn on the board, or a playing piece on the chessboard that may or may not be brought in, depending on what kind of gambit you're using in your chess game. OD is deciding whether there's a board in the first place. So that's my comment.
So what I would say, Michael, is that organizations are always changing, always, okay? And OD respects that, and OD understands that, and perhaps can help the organization leverage even when they think things are stable, but they're not, okay? So because there is no stability. For example, you can have an organization which nothing has changed for 20 years. Okay, let's see all those people retire and die. Has nothing changed? Okay, no, not really. Things have changed. You didn't think they were changing, but they've changed. So I think that when an OD person looks at an organization, he sees that change is happening all the time, and he tries to work with management to push certain levers and maybe change the course of navigation, whereas a change manager will take his marching orders and say, this is the change that needs to be implemented. You come down from Har Sinai, what's it called in English? Mount Sinai, and you give the person the slide pack and you say, off you go, implement the change. You're my man or you're my woman. And I don't think it happens. And look at the amount of change management which has failed. It's incredible. Their success rate is horrible.
So if change is given, then organizations are run by change managers. They're called CEOs.
I think that I'm not saying that change management is not an executive role. It is, but it's not an OD profession.
No.
That's what I'm saying.
I want to check, just that I heard you correctly a little bit earlier. You said, and you almost said it like in the way that this is the value that we bring as OD practitioners. You said, we see tremendous advantage in prolonged ambiguity. Was that correct?
Absolutely.
And for me, I love that quote, because for me, it implies not only that you don't shy away from ambiguity, it also implies that if people don't see ambiguity, perhaps you make a real effort to take them into ambiguity. And then if people try to escape from ambiguity too quickly, you work to hold open that space of ambiguity for longer.
Yeah, I think that the COVID dilemma illustrates that. We have a lot of pushback against a lot of government decisions which are being made all over the world. And people are saying, well, they change their mind all the time. There's not consistency. We don't have a plan. Now, let me tell you something. We here have horrendous government. Israel has a lot of very positive things. One of them is not government. Johnson did this and he did that and he did that. The truth of the matter is that the situation is extraordinarily complex, and no one really knows what to do, and we don't even know if we should be consistent or not. And we're all in it together, not in terms of the wealthy and the poor, because they're not in it together, but in the fact that none of us know. And perhaps if we had less expectations that they know what to do, then we would get on with our lives. That's a poor expectation. It is in politics, and it is in organizations as well, because no one knows what to do, but some people are pretending to know what to do, and we're pretending to expect from them. And so we have this negative dynamic of us and them, which really hurts the ability to be flexible and to change. For example, you have to go for a mask. So people wear their mask like this, or you walk by someone on the street and you put it up, or you see a cop, you put it up. Who are you fooling, for heaven's sakes? Well, that's a dynamic. That's a dynamic which we have because we want clarity. And when there is clarity, we get all confused because the situation changes all the time. And so I think that and what we're seeing in COVID is the same thing that happens in an organization at a much smaller scale. Is we just don't know, and we need to maintain flexibility and all move in the same direction without this endless finger pointing. That's what OD is.
Yeah.
I wanted to come in again on the change thing. And I suppose I'm just speaking from my practical experience, working in an organization as an internal OD consultant.
What type of organization?
In a financial services insurance organization as an internal OD consultant. And in my experience, I agree with you that we don't drive change and we don't manage it. But I think we are there in the change process. We're there watching the process, picking up the ambiguities.
I didn't get the word. We are?
There.
Oh, there.
In the change process. So we're watching, we're diagnosing, we're looking at what is happening in the interactions and in the systems. And I do believe that we, to a certain extent, are ensuring that the people engagement in the change is optimal. And I do believe that's our role. So I don't think we can stand out of change projects. They're very badly run by many change managers, and they work against the goals we're working towards. And yeah, so that's how I've experienced our role in change.
Excellent comment, because Deborah, I want to talk to you about something which has been going through my mind since our last interchange. Let's talk about a project which I did many years ago. One was a company that was acquired, and it was a company of 500 people who bought a group of 10 people with a great idea, and they spent millions of dollars buying them. And the people who were acquired said, we want to continue using Eudora, which was old email software. We don't want Microsoft Outlook. Microsoft are pigs. We have another scheduler. We have something to do our books. We want to keep using Eudora. And the company which acquired them was using Microsoft Outlook. And the question was, there was a change management program set up to migrate the Eudora users into the platform of the main company. And this project went on for 2 years, and they were always using two systems. And oh, we didn't send you this mail. We didn't. And the Eudora users, by the way, weren't speaking in English either. They were speaking in German. Actually, they were talking in German on their internal mails, and a whole bunch of misunderstandings. Now, a change manager would say, okay, how do we do it? And I think what an OD person will say is, why won't this change happen? Okay, where are the terror attacks against implementation? So I think it's two different ways of looking at the same problem, and probably we could get value out of both. A change manager will say, let's go, and the OD present, this isn't going to work. You know, there's a system that people are going to resist. People don't want to undertake that change. So I think that often OD is the devil's advocate, because we're looking at things which aren't tangible, whereas the change people are looking for things that are tangible. And in a more pacifistic view of how professions live together, those two professions can work hand in hand, but they ain't the same profession.
Agreed.
Yeah, Allon, Roy was saying in the chat that what about change at varying levels of complexity? So there's transactional change and complex change. Roy, do you want to speak?
Sure. I was just thinking about change management. If you think about change management as, the little flags and the mouse pads, and that we were doing this, now we're going to be doing that, rah, 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 versus how are we going to integrate two complex systems with a merger or an acquisition and work at a cultural level. And that could be called change navigation, but it's got the word change in it, but it's got a truckload of OD stuff, because you're working with the leadership, you're working with the cultural artifacts, you're removing things that are in the way of change happening. So if we think about complex change versus simple change, the ordered world or the unordered world, it's still called change management, but I think that the complex change is more OD heavy.
Totally agree. I think that if we talk about a merger and acquisition, I don't think any change management program they have almost nothing to offer there, because most of it is resistance, which is unseen. And you can let's make two cultures into one IT department, merge our sales pitch. We're going to start selling for value, but we're going to be blah, 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 blah. None of that works without a bloodbath. I think that simple change is far easier. and it really doesn't need to. We don't get into the need for who will do this, a change manager or OD. I think that in very professions, for example, if I had to teach auditors to implement an ERP, okay, yeah, change management could work as well as OD. However, if people have a parallel way of doing business besides the ERP, you're going to need OD. Now, I have seen endless ERP or SAP projects which have been implemented using change management, and well, okay, we have the ERP, but we also have an ERP. We have a way of making decisions on WhatsApp. We send texts. We order equipment and pay for it later. And so I think that if you want to rigidly implement an ERP or SAP, you need OD to close all the alternatives. A lot of companies fail in introducing ERP and SAP because they don't close the other doors. Okay, and so yeah, well, this is our purchasing software, but I'm going to give them a call and give it to me, and then I'll close all the corners later on. So OD I think is important for handling resistance, and I think another thing is the more resistance can hurt us, the more we need OD, and the more it's simple, and people are going to say, okay, I don't care how I do it, then change management can do it. Certainly agree with that.
We have less than 15 minutes left. So I want to invite any other questions, whether it's related to everything we've discussed today, or you might have come here with an interesting or a burning question that you wanted to ask.
Allon, just on the same topic,
Marie is back.
Yes. Where have you seen the two really coexisting well? Because I think, you've made it very clear how they're two very distinct professions with very different mandates. Where have you seen the two really coexisting, and what are the characteristics that makes it work?
Well, I think that as always, it's the attitudes of the professionals, okay, who are doing the work. I think that if there's an ethos of cooperation, these various professions can work together to drive change. I think if the organization is cooperative, I think that if the organization is very competitive, then you're going to see less. But I want to go into another answer. I like your questions, Marie. I'm going to, because they make me think. I'm going to go into the next level, and that is ownership. Often a change manager is commissioned by what's it called in English? A senior line manager, or the CEO, or the head of the department, and he will have authority, or he will represent the manager in implementing it. And OD is owned generally by someone else in the organization, and their influence is different. So they often you're going to have change management will be overpowering an OD guy if the ownership is different. However, if people cooperate, then it's all going to work. I think that the younger the company is, the more cooperative you're going to see things. And the older the company is, you're going to see ownership issues. Who owns this? It doesn't matter who the change professional is or who the OD person is. Who owns them? What conflicts are they working? Whose agendas are they serving? So that the ownership dilemma of the expert will negatively impact or positively impact how much these people work together. And, I think I generally look at any organization which is, you know, more than 15 or 20, 15 years older, they're, pardon me, but shitholes of dysfunction, right? It's a politics, 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 politics. And the more political it is, the worse everything looks. Roy, you got to get used to that. I'm not politically correct at all.
Yeah, that was
Hi, Lisa.
Thanks.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Lingiwe, you want to ask something?
Yeah, thank you, Allon, for everything that you've just mentioned, and you just really made me think. Because in my personal view, and I always say that I always foresee maybe in some equation where change management and organizational development can actually complement one another. And the reason why I'm saying that is because when you look at change management, we look at structures or approaches. I'm just going to speak on the top of my head right now, and transitioning the team and the organization from the current culture to the desired culture. And that's how I see change management, and how then OD comes in a form of putting certain frameworks in order for the organization to get there. So now I don't know where I'm standing right now. It's based on the information, which is very informative. But now I'm just trying to navigate myself, because on an OD side, and I'm very much aware that it's just a matter of methodologies and frameworks that you put in place and technologies that are required in order for us to put in place the change management within the organization. Hence what I'm saying, change management and OD, they actually complement each other. So I don't know when is the time to let go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I want to call, first of all, how do I pronounce your first name?
Lingiwe.
Lingiwe? Okay, Lingiwe. I may mispronounce that, but Lingiwe. I think that as an OD person, I think that the level of collaboration is far, far more important than who does what. Okay, if we have two people working together in professions which collaborate with one another, they'll work together well. And if there's a competitive political context, they will not work well. That's number one. So I think that the glue of cooperation is the most valuable predictor of how these professions will collaborate or compete. In a competitive atmosphere, they'll eat each other up. And in a collaborative atmosphere, they will work together. Okay, I'll give you an example. I'm very tall. Of course, you can't see that I'm very tall, but I'm very, very tall. And as a result, my back hurts all the time. I've suffered my whole life from back pain. And you know, I go to an orthopedist and he says, well, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then I see a chiropractor, and then someone puts hot water or air or whatever they do. And I have found that if I get three people who are helping me and they collaborate, I feel much more comfortable than say, what are you going to a chiropractor for? It's a bunch of crap. Or, orthopedic surgeons, they can't do anything. I want the people that I work with to collaborate. And once that atmosphere exists, then each side will look at the other side and say, okay, our success is not the issue. The client's needs is the issue. So let's take a little bit out of change management and a little bit out of OD and a little bit out of whatever, and make the best of a bad situation, or put our heads together and think. So I think that if there is political animosity and a context of infighting, this ain't going to work. But I think that if the context is collaborative, I would certainly agree that your comment is absolutely correct.
Allon, you speak of collaboration. Now, I have a marketing background, and I happen to study OD at the academy. Some might argue that was a step in a better and higher direction, but
Thank you.
The way you've juxtapositioned OD and change management, I can't help think that you know, we've had similar discussions in organizations between marketing and sales. You know, collaboration is what it's about. There really is, and there's competition. And they've each got their place, and typically, normally sequentially. And there's lots of, and people use the terms interchangeably, you know, often. So it seems like a similar dilemma, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely. I think that they do, they have shared, look, if I want to moderate what I said earlier, in line of what you've just said, Michael, I think that change management in and of itself does not drive change. And OD in and of itself can enable, but perhaps it's a bit chaotic. So I think that if we bring both sides to the table, we certainly get a better product. This having been said, OD and change management are different professions.
Yep.
Along Benadi Beard here, and apologies up front, I've missed the better part of this whole conversation. You know, starting with the online conversation, the quality of a forum like this is only as good as the quality of your connection and your tech support. Be that as it may, what I'm hearing reminds me of what the wise man once taught me. That wise man happens to be on this call, and he said, feeling is always the right size. So here goes. I feel that there's too much emphasis on one or the other concept or process, or is it collaboration, is it ownership, is it change management, is it OD, is it this, is it that? Whereas and I want to test your opinion about this, please, Allon. I'm a very firm believer that you've got a wide range of stuff. And whatever you do, whether it's process, methodology, modality, whatever the case or the question might be, whether it's anything, you start the conversation with context and purpose. What is the context that we're dealing with in this case? That might change very drastically. If the context is a crisis and we quickly want to solve a structure issue, then the purpose is very different than when the context is that it's a very old, traditional, large organization where there's an ingrained culture of infighting and politics, and we've got to launch a massive leadership, visible felt leadership, and OD structural intervention, etc. And then, you know, the purpose is very, very, very different. And then that OD intervention results in some change or the other. And then the purpose of change management is a supporting process to actually embed the OD results that you want. So coming back to a very long-winded conversation.
No, not long-winded, very, very good comment.
Your opinion about context and purpose to be the focus driving the decisions around all of these matters, please.
Okay, number one is I, as Christo and Liesl know, I love accents. So I notice that Liesl and Christo and you have the same accent. I may be wrong, but they sound similar. Am I correct, by the way? That's pretty, okay.
I think we've just been in many forums together for too long and we start sounding like each other. But it's a very good observation. Yes.
No, you sound like my brother-in-law. So I was just, what I want to say this is that absolutely context and purpose are clear, are key. You know, that I totally agree with that, and I think that they give a lot of hints in terms of where we're going. This having been said, there are always tremendous surprises. For example, very, very simple things which turn out to be very hard to do, okay? And extraordinarily surprising takeaways, okay, from non-related issues. I'll give you an example. Far less people in the world are sick now than ever were sick since the end of World War I. People aren't getting aren't getting the flu, or a lot of people aren't getting the flu. A lot of people aren't getting sick. Putting COVID aside, death rates are way down. Very few wars. Lots of borders which were totally closed are far more porous. And you know, what does that have to do with what we've been going through? There's huge changes in crime, huge changes in mental illness. A lot of these things were totally unpredictable. So yes, we can guess, we can assume that context and purpose, we can assume that they guide us in one area, but we can be totally surprised, especially about purpose. I think about both, actually. I think that we can be surprised. There's always surprise. Simple things which are hard to do and hard things which are simple to do. And so, yes, they are good tools to judge what can work best, and yet we should always be surprised. So always be ready to be surprised, because one of the things that context and purpose do is they lay down some assumptions, and I think that being without assumptions is an important part of the skills that OD people bring to the table. That, I think that was a question which was asked by Dr. Well, someone asked me that question. Yeah. So I think that learning to work with less assumptions is a critical skill. Context and purpose, yes, but let's be very, very light on the pedal in terms of our assumptions.
Bernardi, you happy with that?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. I mean, we could have a very lively debate about this, but then we'll have to start at the pure role of an OD practitioner who's got a free hand with the tension of an OD practitioner within an organization where the old saying goes, he who pays the bill makes the rules, and you've got to guide the organization through these assumptions and away from the assumptions, and you've got to guide the organization, but you are bound to a large degree with the context and the purpose of the organization. But certainly I fully agree with the surprises and the unexpected and challenge the assumptions. That is absolutely vital, I think. So thanks very much for that, Allon.
I think that South Africa in general has provided the world with probably the greatest example of things happening which surprise the world, right? So clearly that's everything that I've read is, you know, everything that happened, you look back at the 60s, who thought it would end like this? You know, who thought it would end like this, or at least begin like this? So it's very, very, very hard to know.
Yep. And I love that you also said this whole, like, there's less people sick now than there would be in a normal year because everybody's getting sick with something else, and it's that there's unintended surprises. That's just, yeah. we've run over by 4 minutes. So I guess we should wrap up.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to speak to all of you.
Thank you, Allon. We'll definitely invite you back next year. I hope it's still a pleasure then.